You have seen how some people solve technical issues. That's fantastic. Oh, now where are my notes? I've left them somewhere. Folks, welcome to the first of 6 classes in French, art, and history. You will leave enriched, sophisticated, and just so knowledgeable of the art world. My name is Charlene Bunis, and I'm going to be the class coordinator for these next 6 weeks. I'm going to tell you that for all of our classes, we ask people to please turn off your electronics, except pacemakers. Thank you. That was a joke. Thank you for getting it. Tomorrow's class, by the way, those of you who have never taken an Oakmont lifelong learning class, and some of your faces do look new to me. It could be that I'm wearing my glasses. It could also be that you've had a facelift, but maybe you have never taken a class. I will tell you that this particular session, which is the winter session, it lasts 8 weeks. Some of the classes are 4 weeks. This class is 6 weeks. We have, and this is the beginning week. Tomorrow, the class will be presented at 3 o'clock at the East Rec. And that class should be pretty interesting. It's called Family in Global Perspectives. And the instructor gave her pitch at the preview, and it wasn't just the family in global perspective, it was also about what kind of personality do you bring to the table in your marriage? And I thought, oh boy, I hope my husband's not taking this one. He isn't. Okay, so that's for tomorrow. And today, I draw our attention to our instructor and our class. Before I introduce our instructor, I will tell you that he won't tell you this. He is a renowned artist in his own right. He's had shows, San Francisco, Sacramento, all over the United States. He was trained at the Beaux-Arts in Paris. And he lives here in Sonoma County. In addition to the class that he's going to be giving for us, he gives many other classes, including some on his own. And I guess Zoom, but maybe in person, I'm not sure, maybe he'll tell us. And I have a little clipboard about this size. I think I'm going to put it on the back table there, in case you're interested in being on his email list, so that when he starts a class, you'll be informed. Not to say you have to take it, but you'll be informed. And who knows? You know, maybe you'll never get to Germany and he's going to be teaching a class on German art. That, my friends, is by way of introducing a man who was born in Brittany, who took his training in France, and now is with us at Oakmont. I'd like to introduce Christian Quentin. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name thus is Christian Quentin in French, but I've given up on saying it the French way. So Quentin is what you guys would say here. I am an artist. I work with oils. I work with pastels. I work with pen and inks. And I have different shows in galleries. I have done many, many lectures. I've probably done 35 different lectures on art and history, different period, different places, right? So about these lectures, I strive to find images of high resolution, you know, so that they can be displayed on a big screen, right? And I find these images for free on public domain or on a museum website, yeah? So nowadays, the great thing about the internet is before, if you wanted to find old documents or things like that, you'd find them in an old abbey or an old monastery, right? But now most of the documents, images have been digitalized for free. So now you have access to enormous volume of art or documents. When before you had to, you remember the old slideshows, you know, like 20 years ago, it was black and white, and right. So now we benefit from very high resolution images. So what I'm going, the series of lectures is not a comprehensive view of a French art history, which would last about 2,000 years. Rather, it is a collection of images and artifacts that I found interesting or beautiful, and there are plenty of them. So there's going to be 6 lectures, and today we're going to start with the French medieval, late Middle Ages to the early Renaissance. So this period started roughly 700 years ago. And this period was marked by the 100 Years' War. You guys have all have heard of it, right? And the 100 Years' War was between the House of Valois and the House of Plantagenet. They were both French family. So that's the 100
He's
Years'
using
War
his,
between
his
France and England.
iPhone to illuminate.
And then they had the Black Death, the plague, in 1348. So
It's a
those were
different kind of-
the major events.
We've
And
got it
art
handled for today,
took
but
many forms, and I want to share these
at
with
some
you.
point.
So I will start with illuminated. First, I want to tell you about this image. This is an image, this is a map of the Kingdom of France in 1429 during Joan of Arc, her years as Joan of Arc. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of what was going on. The French had the red area and the British had the yellow area. But then, you know, France was not exactly a country. You had kings that had a lot of different possessions. So I'm going to go through different type of art that could be, that were prevalent during these centuries. The first one are illuminated manuscripts. Illuminated manuscripts, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. They were, the common one were Book of Hours. They were mostly Christian devotional books. You know, each one was unique. Each one was made for one person, a very wealthy noble usually. And they were richly illustrated. They were usually written in Latin, and they contain a collection of texts, of prayers, and also had a lot of full-page miniature painting and calligraphy. And the decoration often included gold, silver, and rare pigment like lapis lazuli, which came all the way from Afghanistan. So these were made on vellum or calf skin, right? So it's animal skin, calf skin, right? So the artists use very small brushes and often magnifying glass. They use egg tempera, sometimes they use watercolor, and later on, many of these were copied by monks. So the one you're looking at right now is by a gentleman called Simon. One of the advantages you have me doing this lecture is I'm from France, so at least I can pronounce the name, you know, because I have done lectures on Norway, on Hungary, and it's very difficult to pronounce words that have a lot of Z and S. So this is Simon Marmion, the Book of Hours. It was made in 1480. Simon Marmion was a French painter of panels and illuminated manuscript. And what you're looking at here is an illustration of King Herod. He ordered his soldier to kill his firstborn. You can trust the Bible to give you really fun stories. So many illustrations like these were inspired by stories of the Bible. This one, yeah. This one is Master of the Euton Miniature. Often you did not know the name of the artist, so they would call him Master of such town, right? So this is the Master of Euton. This is made in 1476, and it's called the Visitation. It measures only 6 by 4 inches. And this is the Visitation, Mary and Elizabeth in the garden of a country house. What I really like about the Middle Ages is watching the clothes. It feels like a time capsule. You know, it's far, and it's very exciting to see such a different period. This one is, whoop, there you go. This is the prayer book of Bonne of Luxembourg. She was the Duchess of Normandy. This is at the, by the way, this is at the cloisters in New York. You were asking me where they could be found. This lady, Bonne of Luxembourg, she was a Bohemian princess, and she married John, the Duke of Normandy, who became King of France. So this is her prayer book. The poor lady died of the plague in 1349. I'll leave them as long as you want. If you want me to keep the image, just tell me. This one is from the same artist, and it's called "The Fool Has Said in His Heart That There Is No God," so he gets flogged for being an heretic. And this is the book of hours of the King of France, François Ier, François I. He was King of France from 1515 to 1547. And the 18 illumination in this devotional book feature the gospel, or it features various scenes from the Bible. And the book is closed on the side with a red, very large red tourmaline. Imagine a book of this value made for one person. And such a book would take years to make. Isn't that beautiful? This is the Book of Hours, another prayer book by an artist called Jean Baudichon. It was made for a French king, Louis XII. And it was made in 1498. And you can see the king, Louis XII, is kneeling in prayer. This is at the Getty Center, that piece. Every one of these illuminated manuscripts are worth a little fortune, for sure. Same artist. This is Bathsheba bathing. Bathsheba in the Bible was summoned by the King David, who he saw her bathing, and he lusted after her. Imagine. So there were a lot of painting made about this event. This one is Le Livre du Cœur Amour Épris. It means the book of the love of smitten heart. And it's illuminated by an artist, a very famous artist called Barthélemy Dick. D''EYCKS, Dick. Yeah, not Dick. And he was one of the most famous book illustrators of his time, and he worked for the court of Burgundy, which was then part of the Kingdom of France. So this is an allegorical romance written by René, King of Anjou. So the book itself was written by a king and illustrated by a famous illuminator. So it's a book that is in verse and prose, and he recounts the quest for love of a knight named Heart. And in a dream, he lives with desire in search of his lady, Mercy. This is one of the image, and that's the same book. You can see that she's very open to meeting the knight, right? You can see there's no doubt she's willing. The next four images are very unusual because this is Le Livre des Tournois, which means the book of tournaments, tournaments with horses. And so they're very unusual because it gives you an idea how tournaments were. So it's a treatise describing the rules of tournaments, and it's written again by the French prince called René d'Anjou, and it's illustrated by Barthélemy Dick. They're very unusual images. Huh? Same book. Same book. This one. It's really cool to see the way people lived and the way people dressed.
Christian,
Yeah.
may I ask you a question about how is it that these books are so well preserved? The
How is
colors, etc.
That's a very good question. Well, I assume most of them are well preserved, but that's not always the case. Often they're kept in the dark. But this is made on vellum. I had parchment that my father gave me from the 1493, and they were incredible, just in perfect shape. But that's not true for all of them. So I suppose it just depended on the moisture and how they were kept. Right. So these were very expensive books. So people went through a lot of work to keep them in good shape. This one is really, really cool. This one, I wrote something. The last image, there is a legend below it, and it's a hereafter follows the two dukes of Brittany and Bourbon on horseback with the crest as if they were at a tourney. So one of them is the Duke of Brittany, and I am from Brittany. Brittany then was not part of France. Brittany was an independent kingdom. By far the most famous illuminated manuscript is this one. These are les très riches heures du Duc de Berry, which mean the very rich hours of the Duke of Berry. It's done in 1412, a long, long time ago. And it is the most famous book of prayers. It's very richly illustrated, again, by Barthélemy Dick and the Limburg brothers. The Limburg brothers were artists. They both died at 30 years old from the Black Plague. A lot of people died from the Black Plague then. So this book is 206 pages of very fine quality parchment, and they measure 12 by 8.5, and it has 120 illustrations. And in it, you're going to see peasants and noble against the background of medieval architecture. So this one is the month of February. So it shows a typical winter's day. Some peasants are warming themselves by the fire. Other peasants are chopping wood, and still another goes to the market. Isn't it beautiful? This one is March, and it shows farmers sowing the field. And in the background, you can see a castle, the Chateau of Lusignan, which was a residence of a prince called Jean de Berry. This one is the month of October, and you can see peasants tilling the field. But in the background is the old castle of the Louvre, which is now the famous museum in Paris. This is November, and it's a pig herder hitting trees with a stick to make the acorns fall. This one is the month of May, and it's illustrated by the traditional May horse ride between nobles. So imagine the work that was involved in creating such parchment for one person. So often copies were made, but they were rarely the same quality as the original. This one is an unusual illumination by a gentleman called Jacquemart de Hesdin. It's the entry into the Arch of Noé, a miniature. Isn't that quaint? This one, I don't know. No, actually, I did not write the size, but they're often fairly small, like 6 by 5, 4 by 6, at most 8 by 12. This one is also unusual. This is Le Livre de Chasse de Gaston Phébus, which means it's a book about hunting by a gentleman called Gaston Phoebus, and it's illustrated by the Bedford Master. Bedford Master is an artist, we don't know his name, but, and this is from the 15th century. It was made in Paris. And this document shows you how you can hunt, not deers, but hares. That's it, that's the word, hares. So he was a French manuscript illustrator. He is believed to have been alive between 1430 and 1465. Now, for more fun, because most of these, have a religious content, I'll show you one that is absolutely wild. So this is illustrated by Jean Wavrin. It's, we don't really know his name, but he was, this is a chronicle. So the book was written by a man called Gérard de Nevers, and it is the roman, the novel of Violet. Violet was a woman. So he tells the trial of the unfortunate and innocent Urient, she's a woman, and he becomes an object of public dispute between these two gentlemen. The former takes her defense because one of them is suggesting she's guilty of misconduct because he claims that he knows she has a violet-shaped mark on her bosom. That's the gossip, right? So his tone is often cynical and scandalous, and he mocks the chivalrous literature of his time. So therefore, it's very refreshing. So the first one, here you can see, let me see, why isn't it big? It should be big, I don't know why. Sometimes the computer does not remember the size of the document. Here you can see his servant is making a hole in the wall as she undresses. And here, the nobleman is now watching her undress. Now, the legend of this one is an enthusiastic couple. Isn't that cool? This is 1451, long time ago. So not all the illuminated manuscripts were so serious. Some of them were quite fun, and they gave you a good idea of the time. Another form of artwork is enamel. You guys are familiar with enamel? Yeah? Enamel is basically fusing powdered glass by firing. So it's used on metal, jewelry, glass, and ceramics. And one of the artists that used it is Jean de Cour. And Jean de Cour painted Limoges. You guys have heard of Limoges paintings or Limoges enamels? Yeah. So he became the official portrait painter of the King of Scotland and France. And he was a valet and a court painter to Mary, Queen of Scots, before working under Henry III of France. So this is one of his enamel. This is enamel of a fall on copper. And it's a platter that pictures the Greco-Roman god Apollo and the 9 muses playing musical instruments. Same artist. This is a scene of Europa, and it's made in the town of Limoges, and it measures 16 by 21, and it is at the Los Angeles Museum of Art. Unusual enamel work with these. This is a panel from a triptych. A triptych means 3 panels. And this is the flagellation of Christ. It's early 16th century, but this is not a painting. This is enamel. And this one is rather cool. This is a plaque. It tells the story of a Latin poem and its hero, Aeneas, escaping the burning of Troy by the Greeks. So a lot of the stories were inspired by the Bible or by the mythology of Greeks or Roman mythology. I have an incredible piece in enamel. Check this one out. This is the Eucharistic dove. It's early 13th century. It's an enamel on copper. Is that stunning? So this bird was made to pour water during Mass. But by far, the grandest form of art in the Middle Ages was tapestry. And so, of course, it's a form of textile art. It was woven by hand on a loom. They could be very, very large, and they could decorate and warm up an entire room. And you could also fold them, roll them, and you know, if you were a noble and you had many castles, you could bring one to the other. So it was an amazing form of insulation. So this one is called called the Inflexibility of the King. It's at the Musée de Cluny, and it's made of wool and silk. This is a famous one. This is To My Only Desire, and it's called The Lady and the Unicorn. It's made between 1484 and 1500. So this one measures 13 feet by 17 feet. Huge, huge tapestries. And again, this one is at the Musée de Cluny. The Lady and the Unicorn is a modern title given to a series of 6 tapestries. They were woven in Flanders from wool and silk, and the drawings were made in Paris around 1500. So there's 5 of the tapestries are commonly interpreted as depicting the 5 senses: the taste, hearing, sight, smell, and touch. Oop. This is touch. This is the Lady and the Unicorn. This one measures 12 feet by 11 feet. And I'm sure that the colors may have been brighter when they were made. You know, this is a long, long time ago. This one is sight. Again, the Lady and the Unicorn. And this is the unicorn resting in a garden. So again, it's made with wool and silk, but they also use silver and gold threads, right? So this was a very expensive medium. As you can imagine, it would take many years to create such a tapestry. This one, just so you get an idea, this is called, I'm not showing you them individually, this is called the Apocalypse Tapestry. And this series of tapestry measures 20 feet by 540 feet. Imagine how immense this tapestry is, right? So this is a large medieval set of 6 tapestries, and they're made of 90 different scenes, and they were commissioned by Louis I, who was Duke of Anjou, and he depicts the apocalypse from the book of Revelation. It's a lot of tapestry to depict the apocalypse, but such were the gloomy religious imprint on society. Did I write it down? I did not write it down, but this is in a monastery. I know that much. This is the tapestry of Saint Eloi and of the Virgin Mary, and this is in the Hôtel Dieu de Beaune. You guys ever heard of Beaune, the city of Beaune in Burgundy? They make very expensive wine because they used to be made by monks. So this is the tapestries that measures around 17 feet. And this is the Hôtel of Beaune. It was a monastery. So basically it was a charitable, do you say an almshouse? You know, where you help the poor. So this is in Burgundy, in southeastern France. Another form of art that was very popular, if you could afford it, was armor for battle. So this is an illuminated manuscript from someone called Jean Colombe, and it's a detail of medieval miniature siege. When you go to France, you'll see a lot of castles, you know. So during the 100 Years' War, they just proliferated. Everybody started turning the building into a fortress because of the 100 Years' War, right? So it became like a craze. Everybody was building castles. So when you travel through France, every 5 miles, you're going to see an old church. You're going to see another castle. So it's really extraordinary, you know? So I'm going to show you a 3D composite image of armor, plate armor. So it's a personal body armor, usually made from bronze, iron, or steel plates, and it culminated in this type of armor that was entirely encasing the wearer. So it's a full plate steel armor that was developed in Europe during the late Middle Ages. And this type of armor was practically invulnerable to sword slashes, but they were heavy. I find this object absolutely beautiful. This is called an aquamanile in the form of a mounted knight. It's made in 1250. And aquamanile, it means Aquamanilia is from the Latin words water and hand, so it served to pour water over the hand of priests when they were celebrating Mass or people at the table. Isn't that a remarkable object? It's so quaint and so beautiful, and it tells you about the times. It's just a horse and a rider, but it exemplifies the courtly ideals of knighthood. This is the armor of a king, Henry II, King of France. And it's a very elaborate French parade armor. I'm not sure that they ever fought, but one of the particularity of the Middle Ages is that the nobles, which were then warriors, right, until they became rather effeminated and they belonged to the court of France, the nobles fought in line first. So all those battles during the 100 Years' War, all the princes, the kings, all the princes fought in battle first. So they weren't cowards, you know. They became part of a much softer class. So this is parade armor. This one is the armor. This is an armor for heavy cavalry from 1600. And in spite of this very rich decoration, this one was used for battle. Very different time, huh? But it must have felt to you that you were being attacked by a battleship, you know? It would be hard to find a weakness into such an armor. And this one is an illumination, and it shows a knight preparing for battle against the deadly sins. Sins was a big word in the Middle Ages. So it's just a fragment against vice. The other grand form of art of the Middle Ages was stained glass, right? So it was an important fixture of the French Gothic architecture in churches that were built between the 12th and the 16th century. Over the years, the windows became larger and larger with more detail, which started to resemble paintings, and it often illustrated stories of the Bible, because most people that entered the church could not read, right? So they had illustration to convey the words of the Bible. This is the Sainte Chapelle, the Saint Chapel in Paris. This measures 50 feet high. And they're just extraordinary. That at the time they could do something like that with glass is rather extraordinary. This stained glass is from the Cathedral of Chartres. Chartres has the most incredible cathedral in France. And this one is the stained glass from the Chartres Cathedral, and it shows the Passion of Christ. The resolution of this image is not turning out to be great, but you can see what an incredible work of art it is. This one is incredible. This is the rose window in the Saint Denis Cathedral. The Saint Denis Cathedral, which is just outside of Paris, it contains the tombs of 40 French kings and 48 French princesses. It's pretty amazing. And I took this picture. This is the organ at the Basilica of Saint-Denis in Paris. Is that beautiful? That's an organ. There was another form of art. Since I'm showing you stained glasses, I'll spend a little time showing you the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. This is an illumination. This is the first image of Notre Dame in Paris. It's an illumination from Master Antoine of Bourgogne from the 15th century. And you can see Notre Dame in the back. Most of you have probably seen Notre Dame, right? This is the cathedral. This is the spire. And these are the ribs, the vault of the navy, the roof. And most of you remember this. Remember this? You know, I was at Starbucks and I was getting a coffee, and the barista told me about that Notre Dame was in fire, and she gave me a big hug. Because there is nothing so extraordinary as destroying culture. You can see people die here and there from battle, but when they destroy books or things like that, it touches at something that is very profound in us, doesn't it? So it was very shocking to see such a beautiful place in fire, and you can see this photograph is a very good demonstration. You can see the shock of people watching the spire of Notre Dame burning. But I don't want to depress you, so I'm going to show you a beautiful map of Paris. This was made in 1550 by Olivier Truchet and Germain Oyo. You can see the island of the city in Paris. Isn't that a pretty map? Yeah, and you can see Notre Dame is right in the middle of this island. Then there were sculptures. Look at this sculpture. They are statues and they're representing the baptism of Saint Augustine. And it's at the Cathedral Saint Pierre and Saint Paul of Troyes. Isn't that remarkable? That's a very good question. I don't think it's marble. So I can't tell you what it is. I did not write it down. But these are human-sized figures. Very powerful images. So you have to go beyond the religious aspect of all these images. You know, a lot of you are not religious at all. It's about looking at the incredible craft and art that I'm showing you, not so much, the content, which is not necessarily what we think nowadays. This is the Cathedral of Troyes. This is an image from 1634, and that's where that statue is. This is the enthroned Virgin and Child. It's a sculpture from 1150, and it measures 27 inches. It's made of walnut wood and paint. Is that remarkable work of wood? So it's 27 inches, a very tall statue. This one is really cool. This is Saint Crispin, and it was made in 1500. We don't know who made it. It's anonymous. This one is made of limestone and paint. So Saint Crispin is the Christian patron of cobblers and leather workers. He was beheaded in the year 285. Is it not a beautiful statue? So when I grew up, every year, every day of the year is Saint something, right? So the only name you could get are basically 365 different names. Nowadays you can spell anything as you wish, but then you were very limited to Christian names. This is the Gothic south portal of the Chartres Cathedral, and it was built in between 1215 and 1220. This is beautiful. This is made of ivory, and it shows the Virgin Mary. This is made in the 13th century, and it's to be found in the Louvre Museum in Paris. This one is the coronation of the Virgin. This is ivory statue. It measures 10 inches high, and it is also at the Louvre, and it was made in the year 1200. This is a triptych, so it's 3 different panels, and you would fold them and you could carry them, right? This is made of ivory. It's a shrine basically, and you could move it around to different places. This one is made in 1250, and it's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Amazing skills. This one is absolutely beautiful. This is a reliquary of Saint Ursula. It's made of gold, silver, bronze, and enamel, and it measures 24 inches high, and it's made in 1509, and the details are absolutely incredible. Another form of sculptures, I took this photograph. It's called gisant. A gisant is basically a sculpture of the disease that is above the grave, right? Above the tomb. Yeah. So this one is some bishop somewhere, but you find them all over France, and they often depict what the person looked like when they were living, right? I was born in Brittany. I was born in the town of Saint-Brieuc in western France. This is the church of Saint-Brieuc where I was born. So you can see that in the Middle Ages, a church was also a fortress, right? When invaders came, so let's say the English came, people would find refuge inside the church, and the church would become a castle, to defend the parishioners. It's a very austere form of architecture. This is a picture I took in the town of Saint-Malo, and you find a lot of those. This is a sculpture of Joan of Arc. During the 100 Years' War, Joan of Arc, you've heard of her, right? She was acting under supposedly divine guidance, and she became a military leader who transcended gender roles, and she gained recognition as a savior of France. And I'll show you a little sketch of her. Whoop, it's small, but it's the only drawing of Joan of Arc that was done in her lifetime, and it's a doodle that is made on the margin of a Paris parliament, though the artist never met her. It's just some guy sketching. Isn't it amazing that we can find such a document? This was made in 1429. And this one is an illumination on vellum. Vellum is calfskin, and it's the life of famous women, and this is Joan of Arc, and it was made in 1506. And this one is another illumination, and that's parchment and pigment, and it's from the 15th century, and it also displays Joan of Arc. I'll show you one coin of the era. These are gold coins. This is a gold coin from Louis the Wise in 1475. Don't you guys miss the day where you had gold coins imposed of an ATM card? I have not had cash on me for years. And I always wonder, how are homeless people making a living? Because I don't have cash on me. The reason I'm showing you this coin is because some of you may think of counterfeiting coins, right? Some of you are thinking about doing that. But this is what happened to counterfeiters. This was painted in 1290. And it's an illumination from the town of Toulouse. Before I get to painting, another form of art, and there were many, were frescoes. Do you guys know what a fresco is? Huh? So a fresco is it's not exactly a painting on a wall. A fresco, they're mixing the cement, the fresh cement, with pigment. So it's a very complex method where they mix the pigment with the water and cement. I mean, it's basically fresh laid plaster. The inconvenience of it is if you want to skip it, you have to remove the entire wall, right? So it's a rather cumbersome form of art. This one is the convent of the Cordeliers in the town of Beaune. I spoke to it earlier. And the next one are really beautiful. This is an artist called Jacques Iverny, and he was a court painter to Henry IV, and he's famous for his frescoes, which are now in the Castle della Manta in Piedmont, Italy. This one is my favorite. It's absolutely beautiful. So let's get to paintings. Right? This is actually the same artist you just saw the fresco. This is Jacques Iverny. This is called the Retable of Thousand, the altar panels. So they made for church. And this one measures 49 by 44 inches. It's oil painting on poplar wood. So the type of wood they used differed depending on where you lived. You use the type of wood that was available. This is in the Louvre in Paris. It's the scene of the life of Saint Andre. And this is Saint Andre extinguishing a fire. And in this one, this is Saint Andre is chasing the demons from the city of Nice. And you know, if a picture doesn't do it for you, I can promise you that if you saw this object in person, you'd be blown away, because there's certain beauty and a feeling of beholding something so old and so beautiful. This artist is François Bunel. François Bunel the Younger, and this is a religious procession. It measures 10 feet wide. It is at the Musée Cannavalet in Paris. So François Bunel was a French historical painter who created many, many paintings for church. So this is done in 1552. But it's interesting to look at how people dressed. I always found that very interesting. He depicts a very different areas. That's why the Middle Ages feel a little bit like a time capsule. And this is another procession he did. This is the religious procession in the city island of Paris. And this one is not so good if you're an artist. This is called the confiscation of artwork of a painter's studio, because then you could go to jail for having debts. So it's not a good day for this artist. Now I'll show you two very famous French artists. One is Jean Clouet, C-L-O-U-E-T. This is a portrait of a man with a black fur line coat. Jean Clouet was a miniaturist, meaning he made small paintings, and painter. He was born in 1480. He died in 1541, and he was a court painter to François Ier, François I of France, King of France. Yes, it's a miniature, so probably in the 9 by 12 range. Look at this little painting. This is a portrait of Charlotte de France. She was the daughter of François I, King of France. And his court was an international center for the arts. So this is painted when she was 7 years old. And she died at 8 years old from the plague. It's an oil-on panel. It measures 7 inches by 6 inches. This is a portrait of a gentleman called Guillaume Gouffier. He was a French soldier and a tutor to the King of France, François I. And the caption above his head says that foolish desire abuses us. Doesn't his coat look like fur? What is he holding? Good question. He looked like a seal, some type of a, the seal that you put on parchment with wax. That would be my guess, but I could be wrong. This is a portrait of, again, Francois Ier, meaning Francois I. He was king of France. This one is an oil on panel. It measures 14 by 10 inches. And this is another painting of the same king, but a much more elaborate. This is a very famous painting that is in the Louvre. So it's a painting again of the king Francois Ier I. It's an oil on oak panel. It measures 32 inches by 29 inches. And you will see in these lectures that often faces are painted very naively, but the clothing are incredible, I can assure you that a painting like this would take you, I don't know, it would take me 2 years, a year and a half, I don't know. They're monumental work, right? So you can see the level of details in the clothing. And this one is Marguerite de Navarre. She was a noble woman, and this is portrait of a lady with a parrot. It's painted in 1527, and it's an oil on oak panel. It measures 24 inches by 20 inches. He painted, this is a remarkable painter. This is a painting of a gentleman called Guillaume Budet. He was a scholar and an ambassador and a philosopher. He was born in 1468 in Paris. This is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Jean Clouet had a son, and his son was an extraordinary painter also. Whoop. Should be bigger, but it isn't. This is Le Billet Doux, meaning the love letter. It measures 16 by 22. So François Clouet, who was the son of Jean Clouet, was a very famous court painter to the French and the Scottish court. He resided in Paris, and he's very well known for the quality of his drawing. And he was born in the town of Tours in the Loire Valley. This is actually the Cathedral of Tours. The Cathedral of Tours has a very flamboyant 15th century Gothic architecture with pinnacles. By François Clouet, we have this drawing. This is a portrait of Mary Stuart, who was Queen of Scots. And this is a portrait of the Queen when she was 12 years old. And this is made in pencil and watercolor on paper, and it measures 8 by 12 inches. François Clouet, again, this is a portrait of Elizabeth of Austria, who became Queen of France. This is an oil on panel, and it measures 15 by 10 inches. So often noble would get married, and they would be king and queen of many, many countries, countries they had never visited, countries they did not speak the language. So this Austrian woman, just probably at the age of 9, became Queen of France. This is Charles IX of France. So you can see when I was telling you about the nobles being warriors during the Middle Ages, as it gets closer to the Renaissance, they became very effeminated. You will not see this guy on a battlefield, right? So this is Charles IX. He was King of France, and this painting is a huge painting. It measures 87 inches by 45, and it was painted in 1566. This is a lady in her bath. It's an oil on a wood panel, which is oak. It's at the National Gallery of Art in Washington. So you can see the lady in her bath, and she has a maid nursing a baby. It's a very, very famous painting by the same artist. This is Mary, Queen of Scots. This is a drawing. It appears to be a watercolor. They're using ink. So this is in the Royal Collection in England. And the last painting of this artist is this one. This is Louise de Lorraine, oil on canvas. So you see what I meant about the face is often painted naively, but the clothing, all the attention is placed on the clothing. And one of the reasons is, noble or people of kings, or, they were supposed to have some divine origin. So painting them realistically was not a cool thing to do. So they mostly spend their time on clothing. Look at the clothing. I could magnify this and you'd be blown away that each stone. So they had a team of people working on this painting. Famous artists had a studio and they had a lot of people working on them. The great French artist is Jean Fouquet, Fouquet. This is the Melun diptych. Melun is a town in central France. This is a diptych, meaning it's two panels. This is the right wing, and it shows the Virgin and the Child surrounded by angel. And it's very striking, these colors of indigo blue and red. So Jean Fouquet was a 15th century painter and manuscript illuminator. He was born in 1420 in the town of Tours in the Loire Valley. So this painting embodies the ideal beauty of their day. You cannot see eyebrows, the skin is very white, because the last thing you wanted to do is get a tan. That was very impure. So women did not expose themselves to the sun. White skin was what was preferred. And this painting is said to be inspired by Agnes Sorel. She was the lover of Charles VII, the king. And so I told you it's a diptych, right? But the other side of the diptych is just not as exciting, right? It shows Etienne Chevalier, who was a civil servant under the king, and the king himself. So it's not too exciting, this one. This is a portrait of Charles VII of France. It's an oil on panel, and it measures 33 inches by 27 inches. I'm reading, it's saying the very king of France, the very something, the very victorious king of France or something. And by the same artist is this curious painting. It shows the Parliament of Paris under this king in 1540, how people met, and they had legislative duties. This artist is Nicolas Froment. So again, I'm not religious, and some of you are not. So you have to go beyond, the religious aspect of the painting to see the quality of the art. This is a triptych. Again, it's 3 panels that could be folded, and this shows the resurrection of Lazarus. It's painted in 1461, and it's an oil on panel that measures 70 inches wide. So, it's not like today, an artist can paint whatever you want. You want a blue sky, you want a pink sky, you can do whatever you want. Then these opportunities did not exist. You were commissioned. It was serious work, right? You were commissioned to create certain type of painting. And as you will see through the different lecture, art is going to evolve rapidly. And so this is a triptych, but if you close it, you have this. To see them in person is very moving. You know, to behold such beauty is extraordinary. This one is the triptych of the burning bush. It's at the Saint Saviour Cathedral of Aix-en-Provence. You guys know where Aix-en-Provence is? Yeah, my sister taught as a professor there in Aix-en-Provence. This painting measures 14 feet wide, so an enormous painting. And it's a triptych, it can be folded. And it was painted in 1475. This one is called the Matheron diptych, and it's a portrait of the king and his wife. The king is René of Anjou and Jeanne de Laval, and it is in the Louvre in Paris. They look like a very happy couple, doesn't it? This is an altarpiece. It's called the Cellier altarpiece. It's a triptych. Again, it's an oil on wood panel, and the central panel measures 40 inches by 30 inches. And the artist, his name is Jean Beljean, mean Jean, beautiful legs. Often names describe the person. So he was born in 1470 in the town of Douai near the border with Belgium, and he's known for his religious painting. And I have this one of his that is absolutely mind-blowing. Isn't it? This is a painting. It's not a sculpture, right? But the depth and the 3D, the feeling of three-dimensionality is absolutely incredible. This is called Do Not Touch Me. And it's a Bible story where Christ, as a gardener, in John 20:17, if you're familiar, he said, Jesus said unto her, touch me not, for I'm not yet ascended to my Father. Anyway, this is painted in 1500, and I find that one of the most remarkable pieces. You have to realize that the pieces I show you today, most of you have never seen, you know, a lot of them, neither have I, and you'll never see them again. Do you see what I mean? It's really unique that we get to behold such beautiful pieces, and there are so many of them, you know, through history in any countries. This artist is Simon Marmion, that's his name, Simon Marmion. It's the miracle of the true cross. And I'm very confused about what the story is about. I could not find what it's about. You can see a crucifixion, but there's a woman, I don't know what the story is, but it is a remarkable painting. And you can see the costumes that people are dressed. You know, it's so far away from us. And this artist was Simon Marmion. He was a French painter of panels and illuminated manuscripts. This is a portrait, a very flattering portrait of Louis XI. It's painted in 1469 by a gentleman called Jacob de Littemont. He was a court painter to Charles VII and Louis XI, and he was replaced by Jean Fouquet, the artist we saw earlier. Whoop. He also designed these stained glass window for the Cathedral of Bourges, which is in center France. And this one that he did is very unusual. This is the canopy that was above the throne of the king Charles VII, right? You had a throne and you had this canopy over it. That's the original canopy that was above the throne of the King of France. This artist is Jean Péréal. It's a portrait of Louis VIII. It's painted in 1514. It's an oil-on panel, and it measures only 13 inches by 9 inches. It is at Windsor Castle. Jean Pereal was a portraitist born in 1455, and he was a court painter to the kings. There is something about that painting. I don't know if it's the blue eyes or I don't know, but there's something captivating about this painting. This was painted in 1507. It's a portrait of a gentleman called Pierre Martin de la Chesnaye. I don't know who he was, but this is in the Louvre in Paris. This French artist is Job van Cleve. This is a portrait of Francois Ier, same king, who was king of France from 1515 to 1547. Francois Ier is a very famous French king. He was a great patron of the art and of the French Renaissance, and we're going to see more in the next lecture. He brought Leonardo da Vinci to France, and he lent him a castle so he could do his work. This is how Leonardo da Vinci came to France with two paintings. One of them was the Mona Lisa, which is now in the Louvre. I'll show you 3 anonymous paintings, and it is extraordinary that they are anonymous because they're incredible. But we don't know who painted them. This is Prince Hercule François, Duc d'Alençon. People were very good at having very long title. It's at the National Art Gallery. It's 74 inches by 1572. I think I would look good in tights like this. This is anonymous. This is an oil. So we don't know who is painted. We don't know who painted it. It's an oil on wood panel that measures 14 by 11 inches. But look at the work on the jewelry. This is an anonymous portrait of a woman. It's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it's painted in 1470. You see the head covering? This tells you you're in the Middle Ages, and it's a very different way of dressing, of thinking. So it's particularly amazing that we have some images of these people that lived a long, long time ago. I'm going to leave you with 2 paintings, but there'll be more lectures. But for today, I'm going to leave you with two paintings by an artist called Nicolas Dypresse. This is called Toison. It's an oil on wood panel, and it was made around 1500. He was an early Renaissance painter born in Paris, but he lived in the town of Avignon. And you can see that often the frame itself was part of the art, you know. And I'm going to leave you with my favorite painting of the Middle Ages. This is called Jacob's Dream. Is that not beautiful? It tells a story, doesn't it? And we can all relate without me telling you what the painting is about. But I will tell you what it's about. It's called Jacob's Ladder. It's painted in the 15th century early, and it shows the patriarch Jacob when he lay down to rest beside a road. He saw in a dream a ladder that connected earth to heaven. Is that beautiful? So that's it for the lecture. And I'm going to take questions from you if you have some, right? The next lectures, I'm going to do a lecture on the French Renaissance. Then I'm going to do a lecture on classical painting of the 19th century of France. And a 4th lecture will be on the Impressionists and the birth of the 20th century. Then I will show you 2 completely different lectures. I took 2 journeys in France, you know, So you will see art and things that I've seen in France. The last two lectures are really great. The last one is simply, if I may say, extraordinary, because you will see beautiful things, right? So that's it for this lecture. If you have questions, please go ahead.
Please wait for the microphone to come to you before.
While she's getting the microphone over there, I have a question. I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I usually go by the rooms that show all this old art, and so I'm really glad to be here. But I wonder, specifically, the painting that you showed us, you didn't know who the man was, but you thought it was extraordinary, and he had blue eyes. I mean, this was only about 4 or 5 pictures ago. Why are some of these pieces chosen for such esteemed museums and shows? Is it because of their age, or is it because of the technique? Why should I appreciate it?
Why should you appreciate it? I think art has become very snobby. Often you see art lecture where people would go on and on about how the painting was made, the perspective, and people will talk for an hour about one painting, right? It's not what I do. I don't show you a painting and tell you how you would appreciate it. I think art, like the art I do, you can use very simple terms. Like it's pretty, it's yellow. You don't have to use, very intellectual words. So this painting to some level moved me. There's just something. I don't have to describe it. I just found it beautiful. Simple things like beautiful. So that man with blue eye, there was something very curious and unusual about how lively that port, how unusual. It was very realistic, So I think that's how art should be. It just moves you. The same reason, all of us have different taste. It just does something to you. You don't have to know why or analyze it, It just does something to you. Does that answer your question? But I choose, pieces that I found extraordinary or worthy to be shown. But if you go, for example, to the Louvre, right, in a museum, you're going to see an entire floor of 14th century Italian Virgin Mary with a baby until you're ready to throw up, right? Because that's all it is, So among a lot of them, you have to give me credit because while I show you these pieces, I also see a lot of terrible painting. Most of what I see is awful. I'm like, oh God, oh God, oh God. Right? But once in a while, I find something that moves me. You would have chosen different pieces, right? But this is what I found beautiful. Yeah.
In fact, I see this Jacob ladder. Its style, I can see why you like it because I have seen some of your work, and the preciseness and the.
It's very sharp.
Right, exactly. There was another question over here, I thought.
Is this on? Okay. I've been to France many times, lived there briefly, and I did not see noses on the order of the noses in most of those paintings.
You didn't see noses?
Noses.
Right.
Like the noses in the painting. I mean, prominent is the kindest word I can use.
Yeah.
And I wanted, was this considered to be royal or noble to have a huge schnoz?
No. No. But it is well known that this dynasty, this king that I showed you, the entire family had, they had nose like that. I don't know. He just had a big nose. But I find it remarkable that he allowed himself to be painted that way. Huh? Yes. What are you talking about? I'm trying to understand what is the first?
Francois Premier?
François Premier. Yeah. That's François Premier. Yeah. Anybody else has question? Go ahead.
Could you talk a little bit about the paint and the pigment in these for this
Yeah,
period?
good question. Most of the art then, before the advent of canvas, was done on wood panel, right? So the panel themselves were a work of art, you know, to create. It wasn't just one piece of wood. It was made of different type of wood by experts. And so they used different technique. There was, of course, watercolor, which is just pigment with water. They use egg tempera. You guys know what egg tempera is? Egg tempera, so you always have pigment for colors, right? If you add water, it's watercolor. If you do an egg tempera, they use the egg yolk, you know, the white of the egg. And as it dries, it becomes very, very hard. And then oil became very, very popular. And then people started working on canvas. Canvas have a huge advantage, is they're very, very light, right? The pigments are an amazing stories. I mean, the pigments, some of them came all the way like lapis lazuli, you know, the very deep blue came from lapis lazuli. It's a stone. It's not a mineral, it's a stone made of two different minerals. It came all the way from Afghanistan. So imagine in the Middle Ages, the journey would be like three years, right? And he would go through the Indian Ocean, he would get to the Arab world, and he would ship. So often an artist would sell his artwork and say that he could use such colors, you know, because you can see how expensive some of these colors were. So as I said, you know, people did not just go to the store and, you know, you had to be commissioned. Most of the artists that you see were really trained, you know, for years and years, and they work in a studio. So I can go on about pigments and I can go on about technique, but I wouldn't say too much, right? Does that answer your question? Yeah, but pigments are fascinating. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was noticing in some of the triptychs
Yeah.
that they were unified, the three paintings were unified by color.
Yeah.
And was that sort of a mark of the artist, you know, the colors that he chose to unify them?
Yeah, well, you know, it's the same artist, so he's going to find colors and panel that espouse each other. You know, they're going to be painting the same theme. You know, and some painters they also use gold. You know, gold foil, but you can see how expensive it is to use gold foil. So it's not for every artist. You have to understand what art was then. It was not just. We live in a very leisurely society nowadays. You know, most people work 4 days or 5 days a week, right? And you have 2 days to do whatever you want. So everybody's an artist. Everybody's a poet, you know, everybody plays guitar. Then it was not the case. Very few people created art, you know, and they were commissioned to do certain pieces. Yeah.
Speaking of pigments, red seems to be also a super important color. And isn't that also a very challenging pigment to acquire?
Yeah, well, like they use carmine red, they use vermilion. Vermilion, I think vermilion is made from the crushing of small insect in India. Right, so yeah, some of those reds, the blue came from azurite. Azurite is fairly common. The green came from malachite, you know, the green mineral malachite. They use pigments are amazing. There's a yellow called, I forget the name of that yellow. That yellow is made from using the urine of force-fed camels. They force-fed mango. And they use so a lot of the colors are very fugitive because they're organic, you know. So it's until the 19th century that most colors were able to be made synthetically in laboratories, right? So then people made their own colors. And if you ever try to make your own color, you'd realize how incredibly difficult it is, you know. Yeah.
So I have two questions, actually.
Two.
One, why were so many of the paintings you showed us so small, 6 or 8 inches by 6 or 8 inches? What was the point?
What was the point? Well, for one thing, they were portable. You know, a lot of some of the paintings I show were large. Many were small, but it was a fashion of the time to do miniature painting, you know, and they were also much easier to carry, right? Paintings then, they weren't made to be attached to a wall necessarily, you know, they were part of a book, illumination book or something like that. Yeah, but it was also a fashion to do very small miniature portrait painting, you know?
My other question is, how is it possible, especially on some of those smaller ones, to create such detail, such incredible detail?
Yeah, indeed. Well, artists use magnifying glasses. They use brushes that had one hair, you know? So it's often very painstaking work, incredibly detailed work. And you see that when they paint clothing, you know? A lot of this clothing, and you'll see in further lectures, you're talking years in the making to create a painting like this. So the attention to detail is absolutely incredible. These were truly masterpieces. And when the word masterpieces doesn't mean something extraordinary necessarily, like an ego thing. A masterpiece in the Middle Ages, any type of work, you were part of a corporation. There were the cobblers, there were the leather workers, and so forth, right? So people were very trained at the very early age, they would become part of this studio atelier. And to do a masterpiece would mean to create a beautiful piece. And once it was accepted, you could then be on your own. You could then become a master yourself. So that's called a masterpiece. When after years of studies, people would create something, and then they could be free to create their own business, if you will. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Well, these are beautiful. I think everything you've shown us is just magnificent, and I'm the same way. I race through the museum of medieval times, but these are absolutely wonderful, so I'm glad you're bringing this to our attention. But the attention to detail, the fabrics, I've never paid enough attention to, and I think it's incredible. But there's no perspective. I mean, it's the oddest thing to have such detailed work,
Right.
and yet there's no perspective. It's kind of...
No, it's right. It's not. They're often not realistic painting. You know, the faces are often very naively painted. Because as I said, often the people that were portrayed in this painting were nobles or kings, or So, for example, it's not my intention to show you kings and queens, right? Because I'm way beyond that. To me, we're all equal, right? But it is what we have. So what I show you is what I find. I'd rather show you common people. And as the next lecture progress, you're going to see more and more normal people. You're going to see landscape. You're going to see, right? But these were commission work. So those were the days. Does that answer your question? So the details were mostly on the clothing. There were hardly any background. They were, Oh, the lack of perspective. Yeah. Well, people started painting with perspective during the Renaissance, where they started paying really attention to perspective and depth and things like that. But that was not the object. It's just a fashion. Then I don't think people cared about that. And most of these paintings were very religious. Again, it's not my purpose to show you religious painting, but that is what's available. But these were great artists, nevertheless. So you have to go beyond what it is that they show and look at the craft. Yeah, but perspective is often lacking. I agree with you.
I was wondering, you said you were talking about the tapestries fading. I mean, obviously they were exposed more to light.
Yeah.
But how did they make the dyes for the yarn and in those days? What was their base? I mean, today, yarn is much more light, fast.
Mhm. You mean light fast, you mean resist light? The reason some things resist light and don't is when you use pigments, right, real pigments, it has a crystalline form, so they're fairly permanent. But often they use dyes, and a dye is not a pigment, so it's very fugitive. So they would fade. So, but they did not have the knowledge we have now. So often painted have faded a lot. So you have to try to imagine what they were, how much more brilliant they were when they were painted, But that's not always the case. There were also some people really had really great techniques, in terms of varnishing, in terms of the panels they use. So something lasted a long time, some did not survive the test of time as well. Is that what you're asking me?
Well, I was actually asking about the base. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a water-based dye is,
I really, it's beyond my knowledge, but
Oh.
I know for sure that they use pigment. They went all dyes,
oh,
so they use a combination. They would crush pigments. So, but I don't know much about tapestry making. I don't know about, the yarn but it was the most popular, it was the most expensive medium was tapestry. And you can see these tapestries, they're, hundreds of feet long. I mean, it would require a lot of people. So I don't have the knowledge to describe the art of dyeing, the other dye.
I've heard about Leonardo da Vinci that very little of his art has survived. And it's because he didn't use the paints he used or the base. I don't know the terminology. But what did he do that didn't preserve well?
That I don't know what he did or did not do. I don't think people thought about that then. It did not really occur to them that with the passage of time, they would become very, so I don't know. There's a lot of reason why a painting is not going to last. It could be the quality of the panel. It could be the treatment of the underlayers, right? It was not gessoed well. It depends, maybe the quality of the pigment. Maybe it was exposed to the light a lot. There's like myriad of reasons. And actually, it has nothing to do with it, but I do know someone in Santa Rosa who is an incredible curator. If you have all painting to be restored, I know the Calabi Gallery in Santa Rosa, Calabi. The guy is incredible. I have seen him take, I don't remember if it was a painting of the 16th or 17th century. I have seen him over the course of weeks removing the layer of paint and gluing it to a fresh canvas. Imagine removing something that is a millimeter, So I do know someone with this old-fashioned knowledge. Yeah. So I don't know enough about Leonardo da Vinci, nor do I like Leonardo da Vinci. I know it surprises you, but to me, Leonardo da Vinci, with all these Greek-like men, everybody is muscle, I can see the quality of the painting, but the genre does not move me, right? We all have different tastes, right? But I will show you Leonardo da Vinci for sure, like the Mona Lisa and etc. But what makes the Mona Lisa is not so much Mona Lisa itself, is the background, the quality of the background that gives depth to the painting. So that's all I can answer about the longevity of his paint. I don't know enough about his palette, but you can find those information. But I don't think that many paintings were left of Leonardo da Vinci. And he did so many things.
This is really very naive, but I really don't know. The tapestries, they were done on a loom, right?
Correct.
So, you said it would take a lot of people, but what different people do, because they weren't pieced together, right? They were done in one.
Correct.
So how do a lot of people get involved in, especially some of those that had so much tiny detail?
Yeah, my answer is I have no idea. I don't know much about tapestry. You know, it would be presumptuous of me to make any comment on tapestry. I've never, used that, so I don't know. And many of you probably know a lot more than I do. Yeah. Yeah.
We spoke a little earlier about perspective, and it seems to me that the picture that's on the screen right now is a really early example of understanding perspective and showing it in a landscape background.
Hmm. I would agree. Yeah, this painting has a lot of depth. It has a lot of depth, and the landscape is prominent when usually the landscape was just something in the background. But I found this painting absolutely beautiful. There's something that moves me. There's something that transcends our knowledge, that we all understand dying and this idea of moving to heaven, but it's illustrated in such a beautiful way that we all can understand. And the colors are just sublime. It's very, very pretty cerulean blue sky, the rocks, look at the fold. So the fold of the clothes, right? And you'll see that in further lecture, people studied folds of clothing. That's all they did, right? So one of the way they painted the folds on clothing, right? So I don't know how to paint fold because it's something they studied for years, right? One of the way they did is, let's say they wanted to paint a woman in a dress, right? So that dress would be heavily starched, right? And then the woman would remove her clothes, but they'd be so stiff they could stay there for days and be painted. That was one of the way they painted this very complex clothing, right? Yeah. People were trained. Nowadays, you can paint whatever you want, right? You can paint violet trees or whatever, but people were trained in figure painting. It was very limited genre of what you could paint and do, right? So that's why when you look at the Middle Ages, you have to appreciate the artwork within the constraint of the time. Yeah. So go ahead, Celine.
No.
The next lecture is going to be about the Renaissance. Renaissance will be very exciting. And as it goes, you'll see the progression of art. Artists use different medium and different genre. So that's it. Yeah, do you guys have more questions? No?
Thank you very, very much. And before we leave, I have three things to just mention. And right now, I'm remembering two of them. The first one is don't forget to turn back on your phones. And the second is when he was talking about the tapestries, I was thinking that we have a fifth class this particular session, and it is on the art of needlecraft. The class is limited in number. Before now, we were asking people just to register online. But because the numbers haven't reached the maximum, we decided that it would be fine, because we've got time now to process the order that we need. It would be fine if you would like to register offline, just in person writing a check type thing. So my assistant here will tell me the third thing.
No, I don't remember the third thing, but if any of you or you might mention it to your friends, because one of the things we mentioned is that, for instance, for preview, which many of you were there, the audience was those people who have taken lifelong learning classes before. This particular class is a hands-on kind of thing with embroidery. And so I think there's many people in Oakmont who did not come to preview, wouldn't even know that we're doing something so different. So if you have friends who are into needlework, you might want to mention this particular class to them, because it's so different from anything else that we've ever done before.
I remember the third. Did you want to say something?
that she made crochet. She would make bedspread. Bedspread in crochet. I mean, you're talking a year's work. You know, it was, yes.
And the third thing is about him. I said that I had a little clipboard starting an email list in case you would like information about his classes that he does, which wouldn't be necessarily here at Oakmont, but that you could avail yourselves of. I put that little clipboard on the back table there. And I'm sorry we didn't have a break so you could do that. But you could do that on the way out. Or if you forget, I'll have it next week as well. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next Wednesday.